Good evening, night owls, and welcome to Whisper Crowley. Tonight, I will guide you into a world of darkness, hoping to help you relax and unwind. Perhaps some of you will even drift into a haunting yet soothing sleep. Before we begin, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. And now we begin. Did I just hear someone else breathing? The question echoes in my head, but I can't seem to shake it off. It lingers like a ghost, crawling into my thoughts with every passing second. I glance at the digital display above the elevator doors. 24th floor. My hand tightens around the railing, my knuckles white with tension. The soft hum of the elevator's motor is the only sound I can hear, nothing else. No footsteps, no voices. Just the steady motion of the elevator climbing higher, the occasional flicker of the overhead light reflecting off the polished metal walls. I try to breathe to calm myself, but the air feels thick. It's a hot, suffocating kind of thickness, like something is pressing down on my chest. I could just be imagining it, I tell myself. But the feeling won't go away. My pulse quickens. I look at the floor numbers again, as though they might somehow offer me some comfort, but they only serve to remind me of how high up I am. I try to focus on the sound of the elevator, its familiar hum, its rhythmic motion. But the more I try, the more I start to hear it. Something else. A shift in the air. A faint rustle that's not quite right. My eyes dart toward the corner of the elevator, where the reflection in the mirror distorts, but I don't see anything unusual. Just the usual smooth walls and polished surfaces. Nothing to worry about. Right. But it's not just my imagination. Someone is here. I turn toward the corner again, my heart starting to race. There's a faint, almost imperceptible shadow. It's too small, too fleeting to really be anything at all, but it moves. Just a flicker, a shift in the dark, a shadow that isn't mine. My breath catches in my throat. No, I'm imagining it. I've been stressed lately, work, everything. I'm just tired. But the sound, soft, almost unnoticeable, like a breath drawn in the dark, isn't stopping. There's definitely someone else here. I force myself to press the button for the next floor. But it feels like my finger doesn't quite press hard enough. My hand trembles. I try again, this time with more force, but it's like the button doesn't want to respond. The elevator continues to hum in that relentless, mechanical way. It moves without me. Then I hear it. The sound I've been dreading. It's quiet at first, so quiet, in fact, that I almost convince myself it's part of the elevator's normal noise. But it becomes louder, unmistakable, a soft, rasping inhale. Someone is breathing behind me. I whip around, my breath freezing in my throat. I don't see anything. Just the metallic walls of the elevator, the same as before. There's nothing there. I force a laugh, a nervous chuckle. It's nothing. You're just exhausted, just imagining things. But that breath, it was so close. Too close. I can feel my heart pounding in my chest, my pulse racing faster now as I struggle to keep calm. Maybe it's just the air conditioning, I think. It's probably just the hum of the machinery messing with my mind. But even as I think that, I can't ignore the feeling, the overwhelming sense that I'm not alone. Something in the air feels wrong, as though it's pressing in from all sides. My skin crawls, and I feel the hairs on the back of my neck rise. A shiver runs down my spine, and I swallow hard, fighting the rising panic. But the fear doesn't ease. It tightens in my chest, the air growing heavier. The elevator feels smaller, the walls closer. I need to get out. I press the button again, harder this time, but nothing happens. The light above the button flickers just for a moment, but I see it. It's as if the elevator is playing tricks on me. I press it again and again, but the doors remain stubbornly shut. That's when I hear it. The soft scrape of something against the floor just behind me. A movement. Slow, intentional. I turn sharply, but this time I see something. Just for a fraction of a second, a shadowy outline, too tall and too narrow to be anyone I recognize. I freeze. It doesn't move. It just stands there right behind me, just out of sight. It's like it's waiting for me to turn around. Waiting for me to acknowledge it. But I don't. I can't. If I look, I know I'll never be able to unsee it. The elevator jerks. For a brief moment, it lurches as though something heavy shifted inside it. My breath catches again, but I don't dare look. I can feel the weight of its presence now, suffocating, pressing in on all sides. The temperature in the elevator drops. A chill, sudden and sharp, that makes my skin prickle. I shiver involuntarily. And then the smell hits me. It's faint at first, barely perceptible, but it grows stronger, sharper. A metallic scent like rust mixed with something darker. Something familiar. I try to turn, but my legs won't obey. I'm rooted in place, my eyes locked forward, but my mind is racing. This isn't real. It can't be real. The elevator shudders again, a deep, unnatural sound that makes my teeth clench. I hold my breath. The shadow moves, a fleeting presence that darts from one corner to another. My chest tightens. I can't get away. And then I hear the voice. It's soft at first, just a whisper, barely audible. Why did you come? I can't move. I can't breathe. I can't even blink. The voice is so close now, its breath a whisper against the back of my neck. But there's nothing there. Nothing but the empty air between me and the walls of the elevator. And that voice, it's not mine. I want to scream, but no sound escapes my mouth. I want to run, but my body won't listen. It's like I'm trapped inside my own mind, a prisoner of this thing in the corner. This shadow that's watching me, waiting for me. And just like that, the elevator lurches to a halt. The doors stay closed. The silence is deafening. For a moment, I think it's over. That maybe I imagined it all. But the air still feels thick, and I know, the moment those doors open, I'll find it there. Behind me, waiting. Did I just hear someone else breathing? The question lingers, and this time I'm not so sure I want the answer. The elevator remains suspended in silence. The cold air presses against my skin, stifling the small gasps I manage to force from my throat. My heartbeat is the loudest thing in the world right now, pounding, relentless, thumping in my ears. I try to focus, but every breath I take feels shallow. Every movement I make feels like a mistake. The sensation of being watched is suffocating, and my skin crawls. The buttons are useless. I press them again, each one with desperate, frantic force. Nothing happens. The elevator doesn't move. The digital display above the doors shows the number 24, frozen in place. I try to remember how many floors I've passed on the way up. How many more before I reach my destination? But the numbers blur in my mind. I can't focus on anything but the suffocating tension in the air. I turn my head slightly, but not enough to fully face the corner where I felt the shadow. The darkened space remains still, almost empty, but something is there. A presence. I can feel it pressing against me from behind, even though I won't turn to look. Just breathe. Calm down. I try to convince myself, but the words don't help. The fear is too real. Too close. The smell, the rusted metallic scent, is stronger now. It coats the back of my throat, clinging to my nostrils like something damp and foul. It makes me gag. I stifle a cough, my breath hitching as I glance around, as if the smell could lead me to the source. But the walls of the elevator offer no answers. Just cold, smooth metal. Just emptiness. Then the faintest sound. It's not quite a voice this time, but something close. A scraping noise, slow, deliberate, like fingers dragging against the metal. Is it inside? The question lingers in my mind, but I can't bring myself to speak it aloud. To acknowledge it would mean accepting it as reality. And I'm not ready for that. I press myself against the corner of the elevator, trying to make myself as small as possible. I want to curl into myself to hide, but the tight, unbearable space keeps me in place. I can feel my pulse in my throat now, my stomach twisted into a knot. I'm stuck, trapped in a small metal box with a presence I can't see, but can feel in every inch of my skin. I wonder how long I've been in this elevator. A minute, then hours. It feels like an eternity. The flickering light above me catches my eye again, blinking with an irregularity that only adds to the growing tension. For a moment, I think I see something in the reflection, the faintest outline of a figure in the mirror. I spin around so fast, I almost lose my balance. Nothing, but it's not nothing. I can feel it, the weight of it. Something is standing just behind me. The sound intensifies. More scraping, more movement. Something dragging itself slowly. My legs tremble, my knees buckling slightly under the strain. It's like I'm paralyzed, unable to move, unable to even scream. My hands, slick with sweat, cling to the railing, desperate for something to hold on to. Stay calm, stay calm, stay calm. I repeat the mantra, but it's useless. The words are just noise. I'm drowning in a sea of fear and uncertainty, and the longer I stay here, the closer it feels like whatever is in this elevator with me is getting. The elevator jolts again, but this time there's a strange new sound. A soft thud followed by a faint squeak, as if something heavy has shifted in the corner. I can't take it anymore. I can't breathe. I need to get out of here. I reach for the emergency button on the panel, my fingers trembling as I press it repeatedly, harder this time. Nothing. The silence that follows is more suffocating than the noise. I glance at the ceiling, my mind grasping for some kind of escape. There's nothing. No windows. No way out. I'm stuck. The scraping sound gets louder now, closer. It's coming from directly behind me. I can feel my heart pounding in my chest, my ribs aching from the pressure. The smell, the metallic, rotten scent, is thick enough to taste. My breath hitches again, but this time I can't pretend it's nothing. I hear it clearly now. A voice, a whisper, soft, cold, and laced with something twisted. Turn around. The words cut through the silence like a blade, and for a moment I hesitate. Every fiber of my being screams at me not to listen. Don't turn around. Don't face it. But it's like the voice has reached inside me, taken hold of something deep within. Something primal. I have to know. I have to see it for myself. I turn slowly, and that's when I see it. The shadow, now unmistakable, stands in the corner. It's not a person. Not exactly. The shape is wrong, too tall, too thin, its edges blurry like smoke. It's not solid, but it's there. I can feel it. I open my mouth to scream, but no sound comes out. I'm frozen. My body refuses to move, to act, to save itself. The shadow shifts. It seems to stretch, expanding into the space behind it, until it feels as though it's consuming the entire elevator. And then the whisper comes again. You shouldn't have gotten on. The words chill me to the bone, wrapping around my spine like a vice. I try to back away, but my feet won't cooperate. I'm rooted to the spot, my legs shaking violently, my hands cold and clammy. It's right there, so close and yet still out of reach. Then, as if it's read my thoughts, the figure moves. It slides closer, gliding over the floor with no sound, just the sense of something dark and unnatural. My pulse hammers in my ears as the elevator shakes again, this time violently, as though something is rattling the very foundation of the metal box. The floor jolts beneath me, and I feel the air shift. Something's changing. Something's coming. I close my eyes, squeezing them shut as hard as I can. I want to wake up. I want this nightmare to end. But I don't know what's real anymore. The voice is back, louder now. Too late. And then darkness. I don't know how long I was out. Minutes. Hours. The line between time and space feels irrelevant now. One moment I was trapped in that suffocating elevator with that thing, the shadow pressing in on me, and the next, nothing. Just silence. I open my eyes, blinking in the sudden light. I feel disoriented, like I've been yanked out of a dream or a nightmare. The air tastes strange, like something been stripped away, leaving only the sharp, metallic tang behind. I'm still in the elevator, but it's different now. The walls are brighter, cleaner. The dim flicker of the lights has stopped, and they burn steadily above me, casting a harsh glow that does nothing to comfort me. The sound is back, just the hum of the elevator as it creaks gently, rising with a quiet, rhythmic motion. I glance at the panel again. The number has changed. Now it reads 13. But I distinctly remember passing the 24th floor just moments ago. A low, crawling unease creeps up my spine as I try to make sense of what's happened. The shadow. It's gone. The presence is no longer suffocating me, but the space around me still feels off, like I'm not in the same elevator, or perhaps not even in the same world. I can feel my hands tremble as I grip the railing. My mind races with questions, but none of them have answers. What the hell just happened? Did I imagine it all? Was it a hallucination? I laugh bitterly at myself, but the sound is thin, hollow. It doesn't even sound like me. The echo of it bounces around the tiny space, reminding me that I'm alone. I press the button for the ground floor again, this time with more force. More urgency. Still nothing. The stillness is heavy, and the quiet, once a comfort, now feels oppressive. It's like the walls are pressing in on me, smothering me in their unyielding silence. I press the emergency button. Nothing. Again. My stomach tightens as I glance at the ceiling, considering whether I can escape through the hatch. The idea of climbing out of the elevator seems ludicrous, but something inside me is desperate enough to try. I step back, eyes scanning the control panel. The 13 stares at me from the screen like some kind of cruel joke. I should have known that it wouldn't be that simple, that I wouldn't just get to leave this place. There's a sharp ding. The elevator jolts forward, stopping suddenly. The abrupt motion makes my stomach lurch, and I almost lose my balance. I steady myself, clutching the metal walls, and I glance at the doors, expecting, praying for them to open. But they remain stubbornly shut, the silence thickening around me. Then, just as I think it's over, just as I think I'm going to be stuck here forever, I hear it. A noise, faint at first, almost drowned out by the hum of the elevator. But then it grows, a rhythmic tapping. I freeze, my blood running cold. My heart skips a beat, and the world around me narrows down to that sound. It's unmistakable now. Footstep, slow, deliberate. I turn toward the corner of the elevator where I felt the shadow before, every muscle in my body locked in fear, but I don't dare move. The sound grows louder, closer, each tap echoing like a drum beat, sending vibrations through the floor. My throat tightens and I swallow, but my mouth is dry. It's here again. It never left. I glance at the panel again. 13 still blinks back at me mockingly. The sound has reached a maddening crescendo, and it's no longer just footsteps. Now there's a soft scraping noise mixed in, like fingernails dragged across the metal. I bite my lip to stifle the scream that threatens to burst from my chest. I glance towards the ceiling, half expecting the hatch to open, to offer me some kind of escape. But it doesn't. The footsteps know they're not footsteps anymore, become a shuffle, a dragging sound. Something is being pulled across the floor, dragging something heavy, something impossible. The air grows colder. I can feel it again. The present. It's there. It's right behind me. My chest tightens. My breaths become shallow. My mind is racing, trying to figure out how to make sense of this, how to survive it. There's no way out. The elevator is a prison, and I'm locked inside. I turn slowly, forcing myself to face the dark corner where the shadow had once stood. It's there. It's closer now. The shadow, stretching out like liquid smoke, now has more shape, more substance. It flickers in and out of existence, like something trying to break free from a world that it doesn't belong in. But it's not just there anymore. It's moving, slithering, reaching for me. I can feel my body tremble, but I can't move. I can't speak. The air thickens. The lights flicker above, casting dark shadows that dance with the shape in the corner. The scraping sound is deafening now. I open my mouth, desperate for some sound to break the silence, but the words never come. All I hear is the voice, the one that's whispered to me before. You shouldn't have stayed on. The shadow grows larger, its edges warping. It's becoming something. But what? I don't know. I can't tell. And then just as suddenly as it began, the sound stops. The air clears. For a moment, I wonder if I'm dreaming again. If this is all just a twisted figment of my imagination. But then I feel it, the cold. The pressure. Something cold and clammy touches the back of my neck. My entire body goes stiff. I'm not alone anymore. I spin around, my breath catching in my throat. And standing right behind me, almost pressed up against my back, is a shadowed figure. Its face is hidden in the darkness, but I can feel it. It knows me, and it's waiting. The voice whispers again, soft and insidious. You're not getting off this ride. And I realize with horrifying clarity that the elevator isn't going anywhere. I can't breathe. The weight of the air presses down on me, heavy, thick, suffocating. I want to scream, but no sound escapes. My throat tightens, each breath feels like it's slipping further away. My legs shake, barely able to keep me standing. It's all happening too fast, too much, too unreal. The shadow is right there, right behind me. I can feel it like a cold breath across my skin, like fingers grazing my neck. It's not just an absence of light, it's something more, something that's alive. Something that shouldn't be. I try to turn to face it head on, but the force in the room pulls me backward. My hands are trembling uncontrollably, the edges of my vision blur and distort. I'm shaking so hard now that it feels like I'm coming apart at the seams. The voice has changed. It's no longer a whisper. Now it's closer, deeper, as if it's coming from the very depths of the elevator itself. You're not leaving. I close my eyes, fighting the rising panic. My mind is screaming, but my body won't move. Why won't it move? I try to focus. Think. I need to think. The elevator. It's stuck. It won't move. I stagger back to the control panel, my fingertips brushing the cold buttons as if doing so might free me from this nightmare. My eyes dart from the lit-up numbers to the emergency button. The 13 still blinks mockingly. I press it. Again. Then again. Nothing. The elevator is alive. It's aware of me. The shadow presses closer, closer still. I can almost hear its breath, slow, deliberate, filling the space around me. A wet, sickening sound. I can feel its presence now, invading every corner of the small metal box. I blink. Once, twice. A silhouette appears in the corner of my eye, something standing just beyond the edge of my vision, just on the cusp of being visible. It's not human. I know it's not. It's too tall, too wide. Its shape flickers, distorting like a shadow being stretched across the wall, twisting, turning. And then there's a sound, a low crack, something breaking. The elevator trembles beneath my feet as if it's being torn apart from the inside. I jerk back, but my feet are glued to the floor. The flickering shadow moves closer, its shape shifting into something more tangible, more real. It's watching me now. I can feel its eyes, if it even has eyes. The darkness around me thickens, and I can see a shape begin to form, long and distorted, like a body that's been stretched out of proportion. It's not just behind me anymore. It's all around me. The air grows colder still. The lights flicker, casting eerie shadows on the walls that stretch and bend like living things. The temperature drops rapidly, biting into my skin. I rub my arms, trying to stave off the chill, but it's no use. The cold seeps deeper into my bones until I feel like I'm going to freeze from the inside out. I press my back into the corner of the elevator, looking around desperately. There's nowhere to go. The doors are still sealed tight, and the panel is just a cruel joke. Buttons I can't press, lights that blink without reason. The shadow moves, slowly, like it's savoring every moment. The silence is deafening. Even though I'm hearing the grinding, the scraping of metal against metal, the noise of something shifting, I can't feel anything anymore. Not in the normal way. It's all muffled, like the sound is trapped inside my head. I want to run, but I can't. The shadow reaches out to me, its form stretching, reaching, becoming more solid. It's not just a shadow now. There's substance to it, as if it's pulling itself together, like a twisted thing of smoke and nightmare. And then I hear it. A laugh. A dry, rasping sound that comes from somewhere deep in the darkness. It's not the voice from before. No, this laugh is different. It's hollow. It's a sound I know too well, a sound that cuts into my brain like a blade. I recognize it. It's my own. The sound of my own laugh. But it's not me. It can't be. I press my hands to my ears, but it doesn't stop. The laugh echoes, bouncing off the walls, distorting into something sinister. Something mocking. You can't escape. It's not just a voice anymore. It's the elevator talking. The walls. The air itself. I feel it wrap around me, suffocating me, squeezing the breath out of me. I can't think. I can't move. All I can feel is this intense pressure, this overwhelming sense that the world around me is wrong. I press my palm to the elevator door, my face inches from it now. My breath fogs up the glass, distorting the faint reflection of the hallway outside. For a moment, I think I see something. A figure standing there, just on the other side of the door. But it's not a person. It's not anything human. Its form ripples and shifts like water, becoming something else. It's real. It's waiting. I look away, unable to keep my eyes on it for another second. The fear, pure, raw terror, overwhelms me. I close my eyes again, trying to shut it all out. Trying to believe that I can wake up from this, that it's all just a dream. But then I hear the whisper. There's no way out. And I know it's true. I don't know how much time has passed. A minute, then hours. Time doesn't exist in this metal box anymore. Everything is a blur, my senses are overloaded, my mind lost in the endless cycle of panic, fear, and that thing pressing in on me from every direction. The air is colder now, biting at my skin, so cold that I can see my breath misting in front of me. I shiver uncontrollably, but the tremors go deeper than just the cold. It's my soul that's trembling now. I'm losing my mind. I can feel it. The walls are closing in. The darkness has weight. It's not just the shadow anymore. There are more things, others, I think, lurking in the dark corners of the elevator, just out of sight. I hear faint rustling, like whispers scraping against the walls, but when I try to look, there's nothing. I start to think I might be hallucinating. I tell myself I must be. There's no way this could be real. No way that a shadow, something alive, could be in here with me. And yet, the shadow moves again. I feel it. It shifts closer like a cold draft slipping under the door, but there's no air moving. It's suffocatingly still. I don't even dare look back anymore. I know what I'll see. I can feel its presence growing, like the dark is swallowing me whole, turning me into part of it. The fear is so intense it paralyzes me, every thought clouded by this overwhelming dread. I look at the panel again, mindlessly pressing every button. The elevator jerks, then stops again. Nothing changes. I want to scream, but the sound dies in my throat. Please, someone, but there's no one. I'm utterly alone. The laugh comes again. This time it's louder. It rings in my ears, echoing off the walls, distorting into something horrible. I press my hands over my ears, but it doesn't stop. It doesn't stop, and I can feel it crawling inside my skull, inside my brain, like it's growing roots there, embedding itself deeper and deeper. Why are you still here? It's the shadow speaking now, or whatever it is. The voice is no longer a whisper, but something tangible. I feel it vibrate in the very walls of my chest, like it's inside of me, seeping through my skin. I stagger, but there's nowhere to go. My feet are locked in place. My pulse is a hammer in my throat, in my ears, drowning out everything else. But no matter how I try to fight it, the pressure of the air, the weight of the darkness is crushing me. It's not real. This isn't real. I repeat the words like a mantra, trying to hold on to something, anything, to keep me grounded. But the more I say it, the more I doubt it. The more I feel myself slipping. The laughter grows louder, more frenzied. And then I hear something new. A whisper. A voice softer now, like it's coming from the depths of the metal walls themselves. Get out. I freeze. The voice is familiar. Too familiar. It's mine. I close my eyes tightly, my hands trembling as I clutch the railing. I try to push the voice away, but it keeps coming back. I can't stop it. My own voice repeating over and over again, get out. Get out. Get out. It's not the elevator anymore. It's me. I feel my breath quicken. My heartbeat pounds in my chest like it's trying to break free. But there's no way out. There's no way out, and I know it now. I can feel the finality of it in the air, the way the space around me tightens, like the elevator is no longer just a place, but a living thing. It's pulling me into itself, dragging me deeper into this impossible nightmare. I step backward and the floor feels wrong. It's uneven, soft. My foot sinks slightly like I'm stepping into something. No, I look down. The floor is covered in something wet. Slick, dark, blood. My stomach churns and I stumble back, fighting the urge to retch. The blood spreads outward, like it's seeping up from the floorboards themselves, pooling at my feet. I want to scream. I need to scream. But I can't. The words die in my throat again, strangled by the tightness in the air, the suffocating fear that wraps itself around me. The shadow is closer now. So close I can feel it on my skin, the cold of it, the pressure. It's touching me. No, it can't be. It can't. And then I hear it. The voice again. A soft click. The elevator moves. The doors open. But what's on the other side? I stare. The hallway is dark, darker than it's ever been. The lights flicker overhead, casting twisted shadows across the walls. The air outside is thick with something oppressive, something heavy that makes it feel like the world beyond the elevator is just as wrong as what I've left behind inside it. I hesitate. I know I shouldn't step out. I know what's waiting for me out there. I can feel it. Whatever it is, it's waiting just beyond the threshold. I can't do it. I can't leave. But I have to. I take one trembling step forward. And then another. My foot touches the floor outside. The elevator doors slide closed behind me, cutting off the only escape I had. And then in the stillness, the voice whispers again. It's too late, and the elevator starts its descent again. I hope you enjoyed the first story. If you did, don't forget to leave a like, but if I didn't do my job well, feel free to give it a thumbs down. Either way, drop a comment and let us know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, let's continue. I don't know how to explain it, but I'll try. It wasn't just the sound of the phone ringing. It wasn't just the weird urgency in the voice on the other end. There was something in the air that night, something off. Something that set my nerves on edge before I even heard the first word spoken. The call came at exactly 2 in the morning. I had been alone in my apartment, as usual, the soft hum of my refrigerator and the occasional car passing outside the only sounds that kept me company. It had been a quiet evening, the kind that left me with too much time to think, about work, about life, about the strange feeling that had been creeping into my thoughts these past few days. A feeling I couldn't shake. Like something was about to happen, something I couldn't control. Then the phone rang. At first, I hesitated. Most of the time, calls this late were from unknown numbers, or worse, wrong numbers. But something urged me to pick it up. It was as if my hand moved on its own, like I had no choice but to answer. "Hello," I said, my voice rough with sleep. The voice on the other end was muffled, strained. It sounded like the person was trying to whisper, but there was an edge to it, an edge that made my skin crawl. "Don't move," the voice said, barely above a breath. I froze. At first, I thought I hadn't heard it right. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe someone was messing with me. But something in the way the voice trembled, something desperate in the tone, made my heart skip a beat. What? I asked, my throat dry. You can't go outside. Not tonight. It's coming, the voice warned. I felt a shiver creep up my spine. My pulse quickened. Who is this? I demanded, now sitting up in bed. What do you mean it's coming? What are you talking about? The voice on the other end didn't respond immediately. For a moment there was only silence, then a soft, labored breathing. I glanced around my apartment, the dim light from the street lamps outside filtering through the blinds. Everything looked so normal, yet the feeling of dread grew. You need to listen to me, the voice continued, its tone becoming more frantic. You're in danger. It's here. It's going to happen and you can't stop it. But if you take one step outside, it will be too late. They'll get you. I felt a cold sweat break out along my forehead. Who will get me? What do you mean? Is this some kind of joke? No, the voice said, almost pleading. It's real. It's real and it's too late for you. It's too late for all of us, but if you stay inside, you might survive. You just have to wait. Wait for it to pass. The line went dead. I sat there in the dark, the phone still pressed against my ear. My heart was pounding in my chest, and a cold, suffocating feeling was starting to settle in the pit of my stomach. I glanced around the room again. Everything was still. Too still. The hum of the refrigerator was the only thing that cut through the silence, yet it somehow felt wrong. Was that just a prank? Or was there something more to it? The more I thought about it, the more I couldn't shake the feeling that something was indeed wrong. My eyes darted to the window, the faint outline of the street visible through the blinds. It was eerily quiet outside. Not even the usual sounds of traffic or footsteps on the sidewalk. Just stillness. I glanced at the clock. 2:15 in the morning. But it felt like the world had stopped moving altogether. And then without warning, I heard it. A sound, soft but unmistakable. A slow, deliberate footstep outside my door. I froze again, my body tense. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I held my breath, straining to hear. Another step closer this time. Who was it? I thought. The voice on the phone said to stay inside. But who was outside? My fingers trembled as I reached for my phone again, half expecting another call to come through, something to reassure me, something to tell me it was all a mistake. But there was nothing. I moved cautiously towards the door, my steps as quiet as possible. I didn't want to make a sound. I didn't want whoever it was to know I was there. I felt as though I was being hunted, trapped in my own apartment. The footsteps continued. Slower, closer. I couldn't stop myself from looking through the peephole. But there was nothing there. I blinked. Nothing. No one. It was so quiet outside, too quiet. Yet the feeling of dread lingered, hanging in the air like smoke. My hand trembled as I gripped the doorknob. Should I open it? Should I step outside to see who was there, or would that make things worse? They'll get you if you leave. The words from the mysterious caller echoed in my mind. My breath was shallow, my heart thudding painfully in my chest. What did they mean? What was coming? I stepped away from the door, the panic starting to rise inside me. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. Had someone been outside? Had I imagined it? Or was it something far worse, something that was watching me, waiting for me to make the wrong move? And then I heard it again. Only this time it wasn't a footstep. It was a voice, muffled, coming from behind the door. Whispering, "Don't open the door." I didn't know what to do. My heart was racing, every muscle in my body frozen in a state of terror. The voice from behind the door was soft, a low whisper that seemed to crawl beneath my skin, chilling me to the bone. "Don't open the door." I wanted to scream. I wanted to shout back at whoever, or whatever, was on the other side, but my voice caught in my throat. Something about the warning felt so urgent, so raw, that I couldn't dismiss it as another sick joke. There was a weight to it, a finality in the words that felt far too real. I pressed my back against the cold wall, my hands slick with sweat, my mind racing. Was it the same voice as on the phone? The tone was too muffled to tell for sure. But then I heard it again, this time clearer, like the speaker had moved closer. The words sent a shiver down my spine, reverberating in the silence of the apartment. "You don't understand. It's not safe anymore." The voice sounded different now. It was cracking, strained. Whoever or whatever was behind that door was in distress. My instinct screamed at me to run, to grab my keys and bolt out of there, but my body refused to obey. I couldn't move, couldn't tear myself away from the door. I felt trapped, paralyzed by a fear I couldn't shake. For what felt like hours, I stood there, barely breathing, listening to the strange silence. The steps outside had stopped, but something else was pressing in on me now. Something intangible, like the very air had changed, thickened, dense. It was harder to breathe, harder to think. Then suddenly, the silence was shattered by a loud bang on the door. My body jerked back as if struck by lightning. I gasped, eyes wide, heart pounding so loudly in my ears that I could barely hear anything else. Bang! Again a sharp, insistent knock that rattled the door frame. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, my thoughts swirling into panic. Who was doing this? Why was I being targeted? "Please," the voice whispered again, barely audible now, but the urgency was unmistakable. "Please don't open the door. You don't know what's out there." Wait. The voice cut off abruptly. Another bang sounded against the door, this time louder and more violent. I flinched at the force of it, my breath catching in my throat. And then, nothing. A complete silence. For a few agonizing seconds, I stood still, straining to hear any sound, any sign that someone, anyone, was still outside. But the apartment was eerily quiet once more. My breath came out in shallow, uneven gasps, the fear pressing down on my chest like a weight. I glanced back at the door. There was no way I could just ignore this. Whoever or whatever was out there wasn't leaving. I needed to know what was happening. With trembling hands, I reached for the door handle again, my fingers ice cold and stiff. I felt a wave of nausea hit me, my stomach churning as the thought crossed my mind. What if I was making the worst decision of my life? What if opening that door was the last thing I would ever do? But I had to know. I had to see it for myself. I took a deep breath, steeling myself, and turned the handle. The door creaked open slowly, the sound sharp in the stillness. I barely dared to look outside, but when I did, my heart nearly stopped. The hallway outside my apartment was empty. No one. Nothing. I blinked, my mind racing, trying to process what I was seeing. Just a dimly lit corridor, the kind I had walked through 1,000 times before. The walls were cracked, the paint peeling in places, but there was nothing out of the ordinary. No one. My eyes flicked up and down the hall. Had I imagined the knocks? The voice. Bang. The sudden sound startled me. It came from behind me. The door slammed shut on its own, as if pushed by an unseen force. I spun around, heart in my throat. The door was locked again, but the air in the apartment felt different now, charged, almost electric. My eyes scanned the room, darting from one corner to the next, half expecting something or someone to emerge from the shadows. A low hum filled the air. Not from any electronic device, but something much deeper, something I could feel in my bones. It made the hairs on my neck stand up straight. I felt it again, that feeling, the one I had been fighting all night. The one that told me I wasn't alone. Something was in here with me. I backed away from the door, my mind a whirlwind of fear and confusion. What was happening? Who was behind this? And more importantly, why was it happening to me? Then I heard it again. A whisper so faint I could barely make it out. Don't trust what you see. My heart skipped a beat. I turned around quickly, searching the room, but there was nothing there. Just the familiar layout of my apartment, unchanged. But it wasn't the same anymore. Nothing felt real. Everything felt off, warped in a way I couldn't explain. The floor creaked behind me. I spun around, and that's when I saw it. A figure, just a shadow, nothing more, standing in the doorway leading to my bedroom. It was tall, thin, and dark, like it was absorbing the light, blending into the very fabric of the apartment. I couldn't breathe. Then, in a voice barely louder than a breath, it said, "You're too late." And I knew right then I was no longer in control. I couldn't move. My legs refused to cooperate, locked in place by a fear so primal, so raw, that it made my body tremble uncontrollably. My chest tightened with every shallow breath I took, my pulse pounding in my ears as the figure in the doorway remained still, like it was watching me, waiting for me to react. "You're too late," it repeated in that low, guttural voice, and the words echoed through the room, bouncing off the walls, amplifying the dread that now clung to every inch of the apartment. I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything that could break the suffocating tension, but the terror rooted me to the spot. My eyes locked on the shadow, trying to make sense of what I was seeing, or what I thought I was seeing. The figure was tall, unnaturally so, and its form seemed to shift and waver in the dim light, as though it wasn't quite real. A distorted mirage of darkness, blending with the shadows of the room. Was it real? I couldn't tell anymore. The more I stared at it, the more it seemed to blur at the edges, like a dream slipping through my fingers. I reached for my phone, hands shaking violently as I fumbled to unlock it. There was no way I was going to stand here, frozen, waiting for whatever this was to do something. Anything. The screen lit up. I hurriedly dialed the first number that came to mind, emergency services. But just as my thumb hovered over the call button, the figure took a step forward. My heart skipped. It was moving. Slowly, almost gliding, its long limbs stretched impossibly far as it approached. "Don't," I whispered to myself, trying to steady my shaking hands. "It's not real." But the voice in my head didn't sound convincing anymore. The air around me felt heavy, thick with something oppressive that choked the very life from the room. The figure moved again, its presence swallowing the space between us. I snapped my eyes to the door. The hallway outside was still silent, deserted. There was no escape in sight. The only way out was through the figure standing between me and the rest of the world. "Why are you doing this?" I managed to croak, my voice a thin, fragile thing. I didn't expect an answer, but it came anyway. "Because you called," the figure rasped. Its voice was like gravel scraping against metal, low and rough, yet somehow distant, like it was coming from somewhere far away, a place I couldn't reach. I stepped back, my foot landing on something soft. I didn't even want to look down. I already knew what it was, the carpet, twisted into something unnatural, as if it had come to life beneath my feet. "What do you mean I called?" I asked, my throat dry. The figure tilted its head, and that's when I saw it, its face, or what passed for one. Pale, stretched skin pulled tight over an angular skull, eyes too wide, too black, like pits that sucked in the light around them. I stumbled backward, pressing myself against the wall as if it could protect me from whatever this was. My breath came in gasps, desperation creeping in. "You've been warned," the figure said, its voice slithering around my thoughts. "You didn't listen. Now it's too late." I couldn't understand. Was it talking about the phone call? Was it referring to something else? The fear was clouding my mind, and I struggled to keep my thoughts from scattering like leaves in the wind. I had to get out. The door was behind me, but the moment I turned, I knew that something would stop me. There was no way out. Not now. Not anymore. The figure took another step forward, its long fingers outstretched toward me. I could feel the chill in the air, the cold of something unnatural pressing in around me. A loud crash broke through the silence, sharp and sudden. It sounded like something heavy had fallen in the other room. I snapped my head toward the noise, my eyes wide with panic. What was that? What was happening? The figure didn't flinch, didn't move. It just stood there, watching, waiting. I turned back to face it. It was getting closer now, closer than I wanted to admit. My body screamed at me to do something, anything, but I was paralyzed by the terror that had completely overtaken me. Then a voice, someone else's voice, cut through the air, distant but clear. It was frantic, panicked. "Hello? Is anyone there? Hello?" I gasped, my head snapping to the door. Was someone out there? My mind tried to grasp onto any sense of hope, any shred of logic that could explain what was happening. But before I could move, the figure spoke again. "No one is coming," it said. "No one can help you now." The words hit me like a punch to the gut, and for a split second I believed it. There was no escape, no salvation. Just this thing standing before me, a nightmare made flesh. And then, just as I thought I couldn't take any more, a blinding light pierced the room, a burst of pure white, too intense to look at. I squinted, shielding my eyes, heart pounding in my chest. The figure recoiled, its body writhing, twisting in on itself as if the light was burning it. A harsh, guttural scream tore through the air, sending a wave of nausea crashing over me. I stumbled back, blinded by the light, but when I opened my eyes again, the figure was gone. The room was empty. Everything was silent. For a moment I stood frozen, unsure if what had just happened was real or just another trick my mind had played on me. But the air was thick with tension, and the feeling of dread still lingered, crawling under my skin. I didn't know what was going on, but I knew one thing for sure: nothing was ever going to be the same again. I stood there, my breath coming in shallow gasps, as the silence in the room enveloped me. My heart thudded painfully against my ribs, each beat a loud reminder of the terror I had just faced, or thought I had faced. Had the figure been real? Had it been a hallucination? My mind, already frayed by the events of the evening, struggled to make sense of what had happened. I took a tentative step toward the door, my eyes scanning every corner of the apartment, every shadow that lingered. But the room was unchanged, too still, too ordinary. It was as though nothing had occurred, and yet everything had. The faint smell of old wood mixed with the stale air from the closed windows did nothing to calm my nerves. It only made the space feel smaller, suffocating. The phone was still clutched tightly in my hand, its screen dark. I glanced at it once more, almost afraid of what I might see. The missed call, the ominous voice. I couldn't get it out of my head. The number was unfamiliar, but the voice. It sounded like it had come from deep within my mind, as if it had always been there, waiting for me to notice. I reached for the phone again, trembling fingers hovering over the screen. My thoughts were clouded, too much swirling in my mind, but one thing was certain: I couldn't ignore the warning. Whatever it was that had been chasing me wasn't over. Not yet. I dialed the number that had called me earlier, my hands unsteady. The phone rang once, twice, and then the same voice, gravelly, distant, answered. You should have listened, it rasped. I froze. This couldn't be happening again. The voice. It wasn't supposed to be real. Who is this? I demanded, my voice breaking as I spoke. The figure's words echoed in my mind. You've been warned. The phone crackled and I could hear something, a low growl, almost animalistic, vibrating through the line. My stomach lurched. You're not safe, the voice hissed. It's already started. I wanted to hang up, to end the call and shut out the madness, but my finger hovered over the button, unable to break away. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears, the weight of dread crushing me. What had started? What was coming for me? You can't run, the voice continued. It knows where you are. It knows what you've done. What have I done? I could feel the walls closing in, my chest tightening again. This couldn't be real. It had to be a prank, some twisted joke. But the way the voice had twisted, the way the words seemed to carve their way into my brain, it felt too much like a warning. Who are you? I whispered, my voice barely audible. What do you want from me? The silence on the other end was deafening. For a moment I thought the call had dropped, that perhaps whatever this was, it was over. But then the voice returned lower, as though it were right beside me. "You'll understand soon enough." The line went dead. I lowered the phone, my hands shaking so violently that I nearly dropped it. My thoughts were a tangle of fear and confusion, unable to separate the real from the unreal. The apartment seemed to press in around me, the walls constricting with each breath I took. I couldn't stay here. Not after that. I needed to leave. I had to get out. I grabbed my jacket and hurried to the door, my mind racing. The hallway outside was dark, but at least it felt like a space I knew, something I could control. I paused for a moment, listening to the stillness around me. The hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the faint creak of the wooden floorboards beneath my feet. It was all normal, too normal, as if the world hadn't just shifted beneath me. The front door opened with a quiet click, and I stepped out into the hallway, the cool air greeting me like an old friend. But as I turned to lock the door behind me, something made my skin prickle. A shadow. It was just a flicker at first, barely noticeable. But then it moved. A figure dark and indistinct just at the end of the hall. I froze, my eyes locked on it. It didn't move closer, but it didn't disappear either. I took a shaky step forward, my instincts screaming at me to turn around, to run. But I couldn't. I had to know. I had to see what it was. I approached cautiously, the sound of my own breathing loud in my ears. The hallway was unnervingly silent, every step I took echoing in the stillness. The figure remained just out of my reach, like it was waiting, watching. And then, as if it had been a figment of my imagination, it vanished. The hallway was empty again. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I hadn't imagined it. That it had been real. I turned to leave, but just as I reached the stairs, I heard it. A voice. The same one that had spoken to me on the phone. "You can't escape," it whispered, the words curling through the air like smoke. Not anymore. I froze. The world around me began to distort, bending and twisting in ways that made my head spin. The floor beneath my feet felt unsteady, like it was moving, shifting, and the air around me grew heavy, suffocating. And then it came again. The noise, a low, rumbling growl that seemed to vibrate the walls. It was closer this time. And this time I knew, whatever it wasn't just in my head anymore. It was real, and it was coming for me. I turned to flee, but the hallway seemed longer now, the door at the end too far to reach. With each step, the growl grew louder, more distinct, until it was so close that I could feel the vibrations in my chest. Something was behind me. Something was following me. I ran. I could feel it now, a presence behind me, moving with a speed that defied reason. The growl was no longer distant. It was close, too close, like a breath on the back of my neck. My body was frozen with fear, and my legs, once willing to carry me, now felt like lead. But I kept running. I had no choice. The hallway stretched on endlessly, its length warping with each panicked step I took. The walls seemed to close in, bending inward, as if the very building was alive, conspiring against me. My breath came in short, ragged gasps, and I couldn't tell if the pounding sound was my heart or the creature pursuing me. I reached the end of the hallway where the stairs waited. I was almost there, just a few more steps. But as I looked down, the darkness below seemed to swallow the light from the landing. I hesitated, fear gnawing at the edges of my mind. The growl was now deafening, vibrating through the very air around me. There was no time to think. I threw myself down the stairs, my feet slipping on the worn steps, my arms flailing to catch my balance. Every turn felt like it took forever, but the pressure at my back, the invisible force pushing me forward, kept me moving. The first landing was ahead, a dim light casting long shadows across the floor. I glanced over my shoulder, expecting to see something, a figure, a shape, a hint of whatever was stalking me. But there was nothing, only darkness, but I could feel it. That suffocating weight pressing in, pulling me towards something. I stumbled, my foot catching on the bottom step, and I tumbled to the ground. My breath caught in my throat as I hit the floor hard, the impact jarring my spine. But I couldn't stop. I couldn't afford to rest. With a grunt, I forced myself to my feet and pushed onward, the darkness seeming to pulse with every movement. The growl hadn't stopped. It was all around me, echoing off the walls, reverberating deep inside my chest. My mind screamed for me to keep moving, to escape, but the terror was overwhelming, numbing me to everything else. As I neared the bottom, a cold wind swept through the hallway, carrying with it a faint, rancid odor. My stomach churned and I fought the urge to gag. The scent was unnatural, thick with decay, as if something had died and was still lingering. The stench grew stronger with each step, crawling into my lungs, suffocating me. The door to the exit was just ahead, but as I reached for the handle, I froze. There was something in front of the door. Something dark. Something that shouldn't be there. A figure. Tall, unnaturally still, with no discernible features. Its presence was like a heavy fog, suffusing the air around it with a sense of dread that wrapped itself around my mind, my very soul. I backed away slowly, my heart hammering in my chest. The growl had stopped. Now there was only silence, deep, suffocating silence. The kind of silence that made the hairs on the back of your neck stand on end. And then a voice. Low, faint, but unmistakable. You can't leave. It was the same voice. The voice from the phone. The voice that had warned me. But this time it wasn't coming from the receiver. It was right in front of me. I couldn't see its face, but I could feel its eyes on me. Watching, waiting. Why? I choked out, my voice barely above a whisper. My legs were trembling beneath me, my entire body screaming for me to run, to do anything but stand there, paralyzed with fear. The figure didn't respond. Instead, it began to move. Slowly, deliberately. The sound of its footsteps echoed, impossibly loud in the stillness. But its movements were unnatural, jerky, as if it were struggling to maintain some semblance of form. I could see it now, flickering in and out of existence, like a malfunctioning projection. One moment it was tall and imposing, the next it seemed to collapse into itself, shrinking, distorting. And yet it kept coming. Each movement was deliberate, each step an advance toward me. My chest tightened as panic surged. I needed to get out. There had to be another way. I turned to the side, my eyes darting for an escape, but the hallway was closed off. The darkness behind me was swallowing every option, and I realized then there was nowhere to run. Not anymore. I backed away from the door, my pulse quickening. The figure was growing closer. Its movements were faster now, more fluid. It wasn't stopping. It couldn't. I turned back to the door in a last-ditch effort, my hand shaking as I tried to turn the handle. It was stuck. Lugged. No. No, no, no. I pulled harder, desperation flooding my veins. The growl had returned, louder than before, as if the thing behind me was right on top of me, a breath away from my neck. And then, as if the universe itself had decided to make its final statement, the lights flickered. A single moment of total darkness. When they returned, the figure was gone. The hallway was empty. The silence returned. I stood frozen, my breath coming in gasps, unsure of what had just happened. Had it been real? Had the thing ever been there? But the stillness was now unbearable, heavy with the unspoken question that hung in the air. Was it truly gone? I wasn't so sure anymore. You made it to the end of the stories. That means it's the perfect time to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. And if you haven't already, leave a like and drop a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have a great time relaxing, and good night.